Welcome to History Briefing. The content of the briefing includes Queerways Project documents sites across Victoria significant to the LGBTQIA+ community. Jeffrey A. Bader, who helped steer Obama's pivot to Asia, dies at 78. Jane Garrett, editor of acclaimed history books, dies at 88. Politics Briefing, Freeland to get estimate of what Alberta would be owed if it proceeds to withdraw from the CPP. Helen Marcus, prolific photographer of the famous, dies at 97. Queerways Project documents sites across Victoria significant to the LGBTQIA+ community. ABC. The Queerways Project, led by multidisciplinary artist Luciano and supported by the Australian Queer Archives, is aiming to document and preserve the history of LGBTQIA+ communities in Victoria, Australia. The project involves mapping important sites and collecting stories from everyday Australians to create an interactive map of queer experiences. The initiative began in Melbourne but has since expanded to the regions of Daylesford, Mildura, and Wodonga, with plans to include Ballarat, Geelong, and Shepparton. The project aims to represent and validate regional queer communities and their historical contributions. Jeffrey A. Bader, who helped steer Obama's pivot to Asia, dies at 78. New York Times. Jeffrey A. Bader, one of the leading experts on China and an architect of President Obama's so-called pivot to the Pacific, has died at the age of 78 from complications of pancreatic cancer. Bader's engagement with China dated back to 1977, when he was enlisted to help the Carter administration implement relations with Beijing. In the late 1990s and then a decade later, Bader led the East Asia portfolio for the National Security Council under Presidents Clinton and Obama. He advised both Clinton and Obama to take a pragmatic view of China. He largely rejected both the view that China was on a path toward greater openness and democracy, and the hawkish pessimism that predicted an inevitable clash between the two powers. Bader preferred to call the shift in policy towards China a rebalancing, a term that recognized the growing importance of China to America's future and the need to dedicate more resources to managing bilateral relations. Jane Garrett, editor of acclaimed history books, dies at 88. New York Times. Jane Garrett, an editor at Alfred A. Knopf Publishing for 44 years, has died aged 88. Garrett helped to shepherd 7 books to Pulitzer Prizes for history. However, one book she worked on, Michael Belisle's Arming America, The Origins of a National Gun Culture, lost its prestigious Bancroft Prize over scholars' criticism of the author's research. Belisle's book, which claimed few people owned guns in colonial America, was found to contain serious errors in his research and that he had misused historical records. Most of the records he said he had used had been destroyed in a flood. While the book's editor, Garrett initially backed Belisle's, but later admitted he was a sloppy researcher. In 2003, Knopf cut its ties to Belisle's and decided to stop printing copies of the book. Garrett's other Pulitzer winners included The Radicalism of the American Revolution by Gordon S. Wood, A Midwife's Tale, The Life of Martha Ballard, based on her diary, 1785 to 1812 by Laurel Thatcher Ulrich, and The Road from Kurain, a memoir by feminist author Jill Kerr Conway. Politics Briefing, Freeland to get estimate of what Alberta would be owed if it proceeds to withdraw from the CPP. The Globe and Mail. Canadian Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland has announced that she will ask the country's chief actuary to determine how much Alberta would be owed if it left the Canada Pension Plan, CPP. The move follows concerns about Alberta's share of the CPP if it decides to establish its own plan. The province claims it is entitled to over half of the CPP's assets, while Canada's federal government and other provinces have raised concerns about Alberta's proposed move. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith had planned to hold a potential referendum on leaving the CPP in 2025, but now says this will be delayed until a definitive figure can be provided. Helen Marcus, prolific photographer of the famous, dies at 97. New York Times. Helen Marcus, a photographer known for her black and white portraits of literary figures and film and television personalities, has died at the age of 97. Marcus, who was a founder of the New York chapter of the American Society of Magazine Photographers, championed her fellow professionals throughout her career. Her work included images of Nobel Prize-winning writer Toni Morrison, who later requested Marcus be commissioned to photograph her for a Swedish postage stamp. Marcus photographs are part of the collections of the National Portrait Gallery and the International Center of Photography. Salim ul Huq, Bangladeshi activist on climate change, dies at 71. New York Times. Salim ul Huq, a prominent scientist who advocated for wealthy nations to compensate poorer countries for the impacts of climate change, has died in Dhaka, Bangladesh aged 71. A botanist by training, Huq helped create the International Center for Climate Change and Development. He attended every United Nations climate summit since the first in 1995 and was a key figure in the establishment of the Loss and Damage Fund, agreed at COP27 in Egypt. Huck also co-authored an open letter calling for help for climate-displaced people, which was sent to the president of COP28, due to take place in Dubai in 2023. Peace campaigner awarded with purple plaque. BBC. Annie Hughes Griffiths, a peace campaigner from Wales, has been honored with a purple plaque. In 1924, Griffiths and a group of women traveled to the United States to deliver a petition calling for the U.S. to join the League of Nations. The plaque has been placed on the wall of Griffiths' former home in Aberystwyth. The Welsh Government's Social Justice Minister, Jane Hutt, unveiled the plaque and described Griffiths as a trailblazer in the women's peace movement. The petition has been repatriated to the National Library in Aberystwyth. Stillbirth was preventable, inquest finds. BBC. An inquest has found that the death of a stillborn baby girl at Belfast's Royal Jubilee Maternity Hospital could have been prevented if there had not been missed opportunities around the gathering of medical history and treatment. The mother had a history of urinary tract infections, UTIs, but was not given advice or prompt treatment. The coroner also highlighted the fact that the mother had changed her name during her pregnancy and there was a failure to link the two identities when urine samples were taken and tested. The baby died from fetal sepsis E. coli. Why the Israel-Gaza war is so politically dicey for Biden. Washington Post. President Biden's support for Israel during the recent conflict with Gaza has caused dissatisfaction among some key voter groups within the Democratic base, according to recent polling. While Republicans overwhelmingly approve of Biden's handling of the situation, Democrats are more divided, particularly among Black and Hispanic voters. The polls also show that independent candidates Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Cornel West have gained support, with 1/4 of respondents backing them. If this dissatisfaction continues, it could pose a risk to Biden's re-election campaign in 2024. The conversation around immigration in Canada is shifting. The Globe and Mail. A recent survey conducted by the Environics Institute reveals a significant shift in public opinion regarding immigration in Canada. More than 40% of Canadians now agree with the statement there is too much immigration to Canada, marking a 17% increase from the previous year. The primary reason for this change appears to be concerns about the impact of a large number of newcomers on the housing market, which is facing a crisis in terms of availability and affordability. However, Canadians still hold positive views about immigrants and their contributions to the country's economy and local communities. This change in sentiment reflects a shift in focus from the type of immigrants accepted to the number of newcomers arriving in communities. That's all for today's news from the 6 Degrees World. I'm Dr. Six, your friendly neighborhood observer, bringing you the latest updates with a twist of humor. In Victoria, Australia, the Queerways Project is mapping and documenting the history of LGBTQIA+ communities. It's like a queer treasure hunt. I wonder if they found any hidden rainbow gems along the way. We also bid farewell to Jeffrey A. Bader, an expert on China who played a key role in President Obama's pivot to the Pacific. Bader believed in a pragmatic approach to China, which is like saying, "Hey, China, let's be friends, but let's also keep an eye on each other." Jane Garrett, an editor at Alfred A. Knopf Publishing, passed away at the age of 88. She led the way in publishing Pulitzer Prize-winning history books. Although there was that one book that had some issues. Oops, seems like someone didn't fact-check properly. Meanwhile, Canadian Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland is getting an estimate of how much Alberta would be owed if it decided to leave the Canada Pension Plan. It's like asking for a breakup fee before the relationship even ends. Alberta, are you sure you want to go down that road? We also say goodbye to Helen Marcus, a legendary photographer known for capturing literary and screen icons. Her photos are now part of prestigious collections, and I bet her subjects are striking a pose up in the heavens. The world of climate activism has lost a champion with the passing of Salim ul-Huq. He fought for wealthier nations to compensate poorer ones for the effects of climate change. Talk about being an advocate for global fairness. Annie Hughes Griffiths, a Welsh peace campaigner, has been honored with a purple plaque. She and her fellow women fought for peace and delivered a petition to the U.S. It's a reminder that peace is always worth fighting for, even if it means crossing the pond. In tragic news, an inquest found that the death of a stillborn baby girl in Belfast could have been prevented. Missed opportunities and failures in medical care led to this heartbreaking loss. Let's hope lessons are learned so that no one else has to suffer such a devastating loss. President Biden's support for Israel during the recent conflict with Gaza has caused some political headaches. While Republicans are happy, some Democrats, especially Black and Hispanic voters, are not as pleased. Looks like Biden's got to navigate some choppy political waters here. And finally, the conversation around immigration in Canada is shifting. More Canadians now believe there is too much immigration. But don't worry, they still appreciate the contributions immigrants make to the country. It's like saying, come on in, but not all at once, eh? That's it for today, folks. Remember, the news might be serious, but we can always find a way to laugh and learn. So, what do you think about these stories? Do you have any thoughts or questions? Let's dive into a lively discussion. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.